Awesome. Well, it is absolutely magnificent, astounding to have you here, Sacred Goddess Alana. And I'd love for, there's so many brilliant things that I can say about you. when we met, when we finally synchronized our timelines in a super sacred portal at a magnificent retreat experience that we were both blessed to be attending through a weekend with our beloved fellow wizard Daniel Raphael. And we just had this exquisite, refined weave, and we were speaking one another's soul language. The resonance was so rich and deep, and it was my experience of your energy was that you're so in the I am observer awareness, and you're so dialed into the subtle sonic frequencies of the field and what's taking place and how we create and how we synchronize timelines. And the languaging was so precising, and it was just a pure emanation of your embodiment. And so I was just drinking in the nectar of your transmission and really deeply appreciating your depth of embodiment and awareness of self, and actually being anchored in that in your vessel. And I'd love for you to share a bit about your journey. And I know that you had a walk-in experience, and I'd love to just explore what that was like for you, what that felt like, what the transitional space was, in the moment that it happened, and when, you came back to awareness of your physical body, how that massive shift in consciousness, impacted your journey forward, and anything else that you'd love to share.
Yeah. Wow. It's so funny because just prior to initiating this call with you, I received some downloads about how many times we've done this together. And it's so beautiful because we very precisely pick the most important times of creation to come together. And here we are again. So thank you so much for, meeting me in this lifetime again, so we can just keep doing the absolute immensity of beauty that we've done so many times before. So it's, I also feel so well held to emerge into the world from some serious retreat time. Yeah. So I think, the way that I would like to really articulate this walk-in journey is it's such an articulation of my love for humanity, because there was like a marriage that had to happen. There's this original being who is born and goes through all of the life trials and gets imprinted with humanity and witnesses the world in the organic way, and goes through the experience in a way that's been crafted and experienced the same over all of time. And there's so much magnificence into the journey of a human, from birth into becoming aware of our senses, becoming aware of limitation, becoming aware of these co-creative structures that we make as a society, that the majesty of this walk-in marriage is, to me, the highest honor, because I come with the sincerity of knowing and arriving to be present here, but there's a lot of interconnected trust that needs to be built between this physical body, the soul that was born here, the experiences that were organically kind of moved through, the ancestral history. It's like you're moving into a house that has so much richness in it. And you really have to have the awareness and honor of how to amplify and appreciate all of those things. But you're also coming from outside of a matrix awareness. And when you're missing all of those things that most people have grown through and with into awareness with, there's a really interesting marriage that happens. And I think that this is the only way that I can truly articulate my love for humanity and our individual self in its marriage to the I am self, because it has a similar love story in so many ways. It's like the same love story and union energy. And so, yeah, I did have an accident. It was on my birthday, of course. It was so precise that I died and reborn on the same day of my original birth, just many years later. And there was a lot of timelines that had to close from the original being. And through doing that, it was kind of like the crash course to like what a human life is like. Original Alana had these pursuits. She had these visions. She had these trajectories. Let's go through them and materialize them. So a lot of her dreams actually were taken all the way to their conclusion. She wanted to be a really successful artist. She wanted to live in New York and kind of inject herself into the masculine regime and climb through it. There was a lot of things that she really needed to do to articulate her mission. And in me kind of going through those with her, it was both constructive and deconstructive to the matrix at the same time. So it was a really kind of interesting way to, okay, I've kind of seen all the avenues of what the traditional pursuit in the human third dimension paradigm is. And then, those timelines closed, and then the space opened for me to have that deep remembering of where I had just come from, and what I was coming to do.
Yeah. That's just so exquisite. I'm curious. I'd love to hear what your how swiftly you orbited through all of those constructs and paradigms of self in order to have that full fusion with your I am, and how that shifted the way that you navigate life. Because I imagine that completely different navigational system, and how that transition was for you.
Yeah. I guess to a certain extent, there was a degree of surrender that was interwoven into some very masculine driven things. So it was almost feeling as though, okay, I'm inside the matrix. I'm seeing the matrix reality around me. I'm obliterating it in a sense, but that is how most people kind of fight their way out of the matrix, is they try and do it by force, but you have to exit with surrender, right? So it's like the same story path through it. But the final departure was the deepest knowing. There was a time I was in New York City. The inner Alana had achieved all of her dreams. I had this big art show. There was all this kind of success energy building around her, me. And, she wasn't seeing the mirror of the love energy that we were aware of reflecting back to us, me. And so it was a huge immensity of energy that broke everything. And it was actually a rejection of love in its entirety. So there was this day that we were in New York. I'm going to say we, just for simplicity, but we,
I hear you.
her and all the other beings that I am. I am. It's you and everybody also. Yeah.
I love you so much. You're just so there.
So yeah, it was this deep mourning and rejection. It was actually probably the biggest glitch program that was going to crash the system. And it was literally, I don't believe love is here. It is a thing that's prescribed. We're operating in this operating system. This is not real. And I kind of imploded into a machine. And I was on the subway and nobody was home, no person present whatsoever. And I was watching all the ones and zeros going around and not moving, not able to move my physical body, just sitting on the train, cycling around. It was many, many hours of just this deep hatred, loathing, rejection that had settled in because of the incongruency of what was being mirrored back to me from the system. And I don't even know how many hours went by, but somehow the body vessel that I was somewhat within, but not operating, got off the subway and walked up to the surface level. And there was, a more nature surrounding than you would anticipate seeing when you emerge from the subway. It was very precise. And the universe just simply giggled and said, do you believe that there's no love now? And it was like, wham, and every leaf exploded, every bird, flower, blade of grass just absolutely ecstatically enveloped me. And I, reburst into that I am knowing. And yeah, that was probably the cornerstone merge moment that recoded everything thereafter. But
yeah,
it had to be equal to my level of love for humanity is what was shown to me had to be, because this is us, this is all of us. Yeah. And I was so grateful that my soul had the capacity to touch into both poles. Yeah. To go on that journey. And I think that is also part of that marriage between the human Alana and what she was looking for, not seeing, felt outside of, and then this deeper knowing, more eternal Alana energy kind of coaxing it out of her, like, okay, it's there, but why isn't it synthesizing? How is it not? I think it was also that marriage as well. And by witnessing both sides of the poles, in a sense, it really was that love story within this vessel. Yeah.
In the contrast, I imagine also from going to that sense of estrangement from self to actually living in the body of self-realized paradise, truly, and feeling the vibrancy, the beauty, the dynamism, the precising pattern, the sacred pattern of all that we are, and feeling the benevolent, soft, sweet, tender, all-embracing frequency of that. Thank you. I love you so much.
I love you. I just feel like this is a conversation that is all of our story in so many ways. And the way that I am hearing you and all the beautiful people that you're gathering together to have this conversation is really creating an exponential amount of doors for us all to have this experience. Right?
Yes. Yes. And that's the beauty. The more of us that surrender into this beautiful sacred awareness, the more palpable and amplified the frequencies of that consciousness feel, that octave of self-gnosis becomes. And so it becomes much more exquisitely graceful and easeful for us to all inhabit it on a continuum. And I'm seeing, with this age of Aquarius, we're in it. We have begun the grand synchronized swim. The freedom, and the liberation of actually moving with that flow in deep embodied union and engagement, and allowing the flower to bloom, allowing to unfurl, and releasing so many constructs of the mind for the conceived optimum trajectory, and knowing that it's inherently encoded as we just be present. Like you said, being in the house. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, what did you say?
I was just feeling the essence of you're speaking into the house filled with all the rich treasures and the richness that you have the gift and the opportunity to be present to. And that's what this massive phase shift in, we say global consciousness, and depending on our vantage point, right, that could just be my I am, me creating the global, or it could be a perceived wider collective self. Beginning to meet the richness and the prosperity, the true prosperity of the present moment in love, and to access these deeper layers and dimensions and constellations of beingness that bring forth so much meaning, enrichment, fulfillment, and having that be an everlasting unfurling that we get to experience, and just being in the full submersion of that without free to be in it.
I feel that freedom. I feel part of the mechanism of the freedom is the compassion vibration. I feel that, speaking between the reality that we're creating and the global reality that we share, I truly feel that those who are able to remain in the I am compassion in the face of all of us are whom will recode it from internal, external simultaneously.
Yes.
So I feel there is this pristine, beautiful crystal fortress of gold and glitter and beauty that is that which we should live within. And also the overreaching embrace compassion energy that still holds court to see all the pieces at the same time.
Yeah, I am so deeply, richly the sweetness and the tenderness and the true freedom. Exactly. That's of just being an all-enveloping source of love in every now, and that being the greatest experience of self in all facets of the diamond that we could ever possibly experience. And to be able to be with the intensity at times of the human experience and feel the warmth and the richness and the love and the expansiveness of serenity in the body, with the pure desire to only pour out more love and have it be so just natural.
I can't think of a time where I wasn't completely just enthralled to meet all of us, all of me, right? And I feel that there, as much as, I enter into my own ecstatic states and journeying into our divine self, the most human, raw, disgusting times have also been the most expanding for me as well, to meet those who are truly lost and in rage or in self-loathing or envy. I have the highest honor for when those moments cross my path, because it's like the more we know of us, the more we hold of us, the more rapture comes into our own knowing. And I feel that the exercise of carrying that into the day-to-day for those of us that are the darkest is an honor for me. I am not inviting it in its, in the day-to-day kind of way, but at the same time, I feel that the capacity with which we hold can be ever evolving. And that's one of those exercises that really blow it up for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that I was sensing into that before while you were sharing previously. That exact essence of love, where there's just such a deep expanse that in those moments there's actually even a greater desire and therefore fulfillment of self to pour that love and to experience the remembrance and the realization of another being who's in that space. I'm still lovable. I can still receive unconditional love like this. Just
it's the exercise of, okay, when I'm at home safe in my bubble, I can be accessing the divine. And when I'm out in the world and somebody's enraged out in their life and I am there experiencing that, what part of me are they showing me now? And what part of my own capacity for love can we hold now? And I really feel that that's where I would love some of us to lean into.
Yes. That's inherently, in my experience, again, it's the surrender and the opening. It's the allowance of the lotus to bloom, so that internal capacity for love does grow and expand, and then we can be with it without any chart. Like, we literally just become transparent, and there's I experience it as an energy of enrichment, because it's so warming. It's like a honey liquid rose gold frequency. It's deeply nurturing, it's gentle, it's loving, and the only desire, like it actually feels like a grand opportunity and a gift, more so than the moments where it's just easy, right? It's easy to walk outside and
the cellular shift is insane. It's like when you're meeting, any kind of energy with compassion, you're literally transmuting that energy from ever being able to exist within your field again, right? Because you're recoding yourselves to know, oh, this was once me. This is part of me. It's not currently me, because I'm here in this contrast, right? And then when you're doing that, the cellular reprogramming is so deep. It is so interdimensional. It is so expanding to what capacity that those cells can hold for more light. It's literally the exercise of expanding the vessel. And I feel that there's true opportunity for direct transmutation.
Yes. The alchemical grail of God self embodiment. in the
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Total,
Mm-hmm.
true invincibility from a space of grace.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see in these challenging times that, ebb and flow around us, how we as a community are leaning into and with independently just continuing the mission of raising our vibration, knowing that that is the absolute direct path to raising the vibration for everybody, but also having a distilled kind of softness around the edges to allow that energy field to be penetrated. Because if we are really directly connected to our own methods of transmutation, as opposed to this vibration, working in this direction, it will just be this more toroidal kind of energy that can envelop and transmute.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. It's the all-enveloping force of love, and it just it immediately transmutes into love. And the glory of that too is there's frequencies, whether they're perceived to be directly within us or representing in a facet of our holographic dimensional experience of reality. It's still that all enveloping. It's developing a transparency is the way that I experience.
Yes, beautiful.
And a deep knowing too that we are the alchemical grail, and that as we have a single pointed devotional awareness to maintain that capacity for transparency and unconditional, pristine, divine love. And we meet every moment in that way and see every moment as an opportunity to praise, to revere, to give thanks. That is it. That's it. That's all we have to vocalize, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling the true story of what I believe is sovereignty really is. I think a lot of individuals hold this understanding of sovereignty as building a fortress of boundary to live within, and only feeling themselves safe and abundant, exultant in that, fortress. And so I feel that true sovereignty is, just as you were describing, this softening, this transparency, where everything is just folding in on itself, and the simultaneity of heart that is not which we know, but we will receive and then know within ourselves. That is sovereignty to me, is show me what I am not, and you will be reminding me more of what I am.
Ah, yes. And it's the embodiment of the kingdom. The embodiment of the kingdom, and being in that grander vantage point of self in all moments, living in the the body of paradise, or just simply the body of self-realization, and being totally free and open and expanded into that omniversal unifying field of eternal light intelligence, that toroidal unified field. And there's no more separation in that. It's the oneness. The oneness is the true sovereignty versus the individuated self separating into some a construct of independence, and creating that fortress. We become the fortress instead of having an isolated fortress. We become the united fortress.
Yes. It leads me to a really ever evolving question, is the marriage of the I am and the individual in their uniqueness. And this, I feel, is a really sweet point of entry into all of our journeys is being in this I am, and also being in the individuality and that union and that marriage and its majesty in its divine purpose as creators here on the earth plane. That is like the cornerstone of where I feel my work is evolving, is to magnify what the individual represents in the I am presence and the I am mind and the I am being.
Yes. It's the way that I experience self at that octave is, well, animated creation, because we're a living tapestry of multifaceted, multi-prismatic creation, emerging, unfurling, engaging, dancing, twirling, all of this. And so it is this sacred cosmic union and dance of how we uniquely wish to shine our light and our rainbow spectrum of colors in any and being in the fullness of that, the vitality of that, just as nature. And we crystallize this most stunning multidimensional tapestry of beauty together as we each embrace, allow, and emanate our unique genius and the way that it desires to shine forth. And that's the novelty. That's what allows for creation to be what creation is.
And I think it's also the highest honor to divine creator itself, because divine creator getting to experience itself in our individuality is the love story of all time. It is the love story of all time. And so I feel that, as we're all in pursuit of this oneness, I think that the marriage to honor and celebrate the one creation that we are is the core mission.
Yes, absolutely. 1,000,000%. And I find that what I deeply value and appreciate about that is the potency and the simplicity of how to engage our awareness in any given moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel, a lot of my work is really centered around an autonomous divine creation, being an autonomous divine creator. And I think in the self-discovery is where the gems lie and the beauty is truly unfurled. And I think that there's a big enough blossoming in the I am that returning to the I am individual, the I am individual is going to be a really enthralling era. Yeah.
The Renaissance, the true Renaissance. Absolutely. And I'm feeling, and I know we have many, many more transmissions coming. There's so much nectar that we have to share and channel through. And I'm so grateful. And one of the spaces we've been connecting into with one another is that space of shifting from the healing and the self-improvement and all of that into creation awake. And being in a space of pure, unbridled, unfurling creation, and allowing the wilderness of that space, because it is so distilled to its purest, most wondrous, innocent essence that we're like children once more. Liberated.
I love that you say wilderness, because it's such a prime example of the most systematic chaos that exists is the wild nature. And I feel like as the capacity of our human brain has been, surpassed, we have surpassed the capacity of the human brain, that now we are leaving a time of systematic being into that wildness. And I feel that is the focus of our own self-discovery is the self-discovery that is no longer limited by the systematic processes of the human mind, but are now surpassing that into the divine mind capacity, which is a systematic chaos.
Absolutely. And I'm even just seeing the frequencies of the Kundalini energetic unfurling itself. And it becomes this rich, sultry, savory, sacred odyssey of self-discovery as we're continuously meeting these facets of our own nature, our own wilderness, our own creative vibrancy and richness. And instead of seeking for the things to be brought into resolution, there's just a gnosis of synthesis that simply is. And from that space, it becomes, well, you know, what can this do? Like, how can we move? What can we create? I'm
in a daily war against this sense-making addiction, you know, making anything making sense. Ooh, that is life mission to end that addiction, because it's so deep and so part of that limiting program that we, you know, have grown accustomed to and co-uphold in society. So the potential for complete nonsensical existence in the present moment of gnosis is everything.
Yes, I love that so much. Yes. Yeah, I actually just I recently shared something to the tune of that very sentiment. Like, what would it be to liberate, to free our mind and actually get into the deep, sensuous, felt, embodied, romantic, engaging relation that we have with our here and now, and to meet each moment with virginal wonder and splendor, to see what creation can unfurl that absolutely transcends the human mind brain capacity. It's that larger divine neural constellation of, I experience it as a more visionary, psychic, energetic, but also deeply sensuous.
Oh yeah, and it's the childlike wonder, you know. It's the, I don't know anything about anything that I'm perceiving, but I am completely enthralled by it, and I love that. That is the most sensuous relationship. Is think of the vulnerability of the child meeting a complete lack of understanding, but just always saying, yes, give me more. I don't understand any of this, but yes, I will receive it. Yeah. I feel that is the sincerest sensual relationship.
Yeah, the pure rapture of being.
So let us, I'm feeling like to delve into, the Akash, the quantum field, the expanded multidimensional nature of self in this eternal moment of now, and being present to all the diamond facets of the self, the infinite possibilities and potentials, and the wider playing field of who and what we are in pure truth, and then how we synthesize that and crystallize that into physicality, and how we engage with that field through the physical. So it's like what I experience that at, it's really heaven on earth, because it's like I'm open, I'm expanded, I'm in the fullness of all that I be. And I'm seeing all of the diamond facets of the self just filling and surrounding me. And then it's almost like synthesizing and radiating, emanating that energy out through the physical in the present moment. And what so this is the space of navigation for me currently, because my being is calling me to play primarily, we're going to say 90 to 95% in the remote, telekinetic, energetic, quantum, akashic spaces and realms for creation. And the other 5 to 10% is what's coming in through the physical, which feels slightly vulnerable, right? Because it's like releasing all of these familiar ways and structures that I have grown accustomed to in order to architect my reality in the 3D. But this space is so much more potent and palpable and immediate. And in my experience, and it's almost like my being is not able to create in the old way anymore. And so, you know, it's like when we're experiencing different evolutionary octaves of awareness and consciousness, the energy behaves differently. And so we create within a certain construct of rules and energetic dynamics that are familiar to that octave of consciousness and awareness. And then when the consciousness expands and the energetic expands to a new octave, the way of creating and the way that the energetics behave is completely different. And so we're called to create in new and novel ways. And my being is just, it's straight through telepathy. I mean, things are crystallizing in my world left and right, just simply through the Akash. And so I feel like a vulnerability in releasing all of these structurized ways of being that I have created up until this moment, this point in time, but also an extraordinary liberation in doing so. And so I'd love to hear like your experience with all of this, how you you know, like how you're creating in your realm, in your universe, and how you uniquely experience these energetics.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's just reminding me of something that was happening to me yesterday as I was falling asleep. Is there was this feeling, this presence of a third perceiver in my space. I recall these years that I was falling asleep by myself when I was like single, living in my own space, and I was falling asleep by myself. There was like no observer energy present in my field when I was falling asleep. So I could instantly transition into the unconscious, right?
Yeah.
And this reminds me, this is like a somewhat of a parallel situation where last night I was trying to fall asleep and I could feel the energetics of my partner coming to bed shortly. And it put this like perceiver energy into my field about this transition into the subconscious, into the unconscious, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't make it across that divide for some reason, because there was this perceiver present. It was like my being felt like it still needed to be here and active in a sense. And I feel like the internet is that additional perceiver. And I think that we are building a relationship to this other perceiver. And I think that the universe is starting to understand itself in this perception. And I think that these tensions that you're experiencing is part of that bridging as well. Similar parallel as me living in the forest in a no being, not being self into a now interacting with other parts of me, others of me in the world, was a huge shift into, you know, being a being.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think in a way you're touching into that, being a being who's being observed and is being a being with other beings in the quantum field.
Yes. Oh, that's just so fascinating. So it's like, it's relational. It's relational, but it's relation with self. So this, to even go to a next layer with that. So and we were discussing this shortly before we hopped on, but it's the unification of self. So knowing the self as one united being, and therefore dissolving the subtlety of separation that creates self and other, and knowing that I'm always just engaging with the pure reflective feedback mechanism of my own consciousness, which draws me into deep internal self-awareness and observation and clarification of consciousness, distillation of consciousness and energetics, to make sure that my reflective field is on point versus perceiving myself as an independent perceiver in relation to an independent observer. So, so instead
this
of
is the transition between the.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, there's these two stages that I am feeling similarly navigating. So in the recognition sutras, there's the 7 perceivers, and there's all these different layers. And intriguingly, there is this one layer called the mantra. It's the liberated perceiver of diversified objectivity, but it's also expressing the underlying subjectivity. Okay, so this is like the mantra sphere, and this is where I feel like my being likes to hang out most of the time. Objectivity as an expression of the underlying subjectivity. So it's kind of like a dance, a playful dance between, oh, objective, oh, but subjective, right? But the layer above that is mantra Solara, which is the liberated perceiver of subjectivity and objectivity as mirrors of each other. In balance. And this is where I feel that your being is trying to take you. It's trying to take you as seeing no difference between the subjective and the objective.
Right. So it's like a marriage into absolute objectivity experienced from the subjective self. So it's the total unification. But then it's expressed and experienced in its multi-prismatic dynamism, but it's still from the octave of the objective self. And so, so it's like anywhere in my own deep unconscious. Of course, we just had a full moon. So I will say I am so thankful because, she pulls up all of the unconscious material and the unconscious, like emotional waters that we have going on. And in my own experience, it's subtle. So for that, I am deeply thankful. There's not a lot of unconscious material that's still left in there, but enough that my being recognizes the contrast, because it's the dance between oceanic self and small self, divine identity and personality construct. And so for me, that's where I feel the tension in my own being, where there's a personalization versus a divine objectification, just being in that space. And so all those micro nuanced spaces of narrative it's really the dissolution of my human identity in its totality. And I'm just right at that.
Yes. And all those parts will always still be parts of you. And this is something that you said in a talk that I listened to recently, where, everything that is in your field is you. Yeah. And so as much as, the ego wants to say, yes, no, me, not me, I am not. We can never be separate from all that is within us. And so, I love the smell of the garbage. I am the garbage, I love I love the repulsiveness of that behavior. I am that behavior. So I feel that as much as I often identify with the departure from my humanism, I also fall in love with my humanism every day.
Yeah. I feel like thank you for that. The way that yes, so it's like celebrating the gift and the gold and the perfection in all of it, the perfection being the unifying force, the beauty being the unifying force that gels everything together, the love, and a very real distillation of superconscious intelligence that allows the mirror to become pristinely polished. And so noticing, and this is where I have to be self-aware, not to go into self-judgment, because that's my pattern that gets me into my contracted spaces, is if I see a reflection show up that is not what I am in the moment perceiving to be the most perfect reflection or emanation of my own divinity, I automatically take responsibility for that. And instead of always immediately embracing the beauty and the perfection in the alchemy of that, in the wisdom and the gold that is inherently going to be unearthed and birthed through that, I can be a bit hard on myself. Like, why did you not distill that facet of your consciousness yet, my dear?
And the subjectivity, objectivity marriage, it's a marriage, right? Is they ever so lovingly hold each other, and you are ever so lovingly being held by all these things that you are continuing to agree that you are not. And this is what I love about being a human embodiment, is the amount of reminders of that which I am not are never ending. And it's so beautiful because it just reminds me of who the creators that we are. And like you said, polishing that mirror where it's like, oh, thank you for the reminder of that which I am not. And I will be reminded again tomorrow.
Yes. Totally. It's like, it's really fascinating too, because when it's in my own being that tension arises. Like for me, it's so easy to hold that space for another facet of thyself to have the fullness of that experience and to feel such deep empathy and calm and care and unconditionality in that space. It's the space of assuming responsibility for it. And then like some part of my being knows and is aware of the polished, perfected potentiality that is there because I've experienced it, and has a visceral, passionate desire to stabilize that in its entirety. So when I notice the points of instability or vulnerability, that's where it's really valuable to be. And I feel like this is just useful communicating this for everybody who's sharing this experience with us, because I think this is something that we can all do in our own internal spaces. And
and in the divine, though, there is no attribution of negative or positive. So these are just ideas, right? So that is where I find the most profound irony is in the Shiva absolute non-dual awareness. The worst of the worst is equal to and no different than the best of the best.
Right. And that's the duality of my own consciousness that I have architected in, that's wanting to resolve itself. So it's having a capacity to be present to the profound and the profane with equal ecstasy. Yeah. And primarily within myself, because it's out here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you didn't want to be that, you would be back in the infinite. And I have this reminder all the time. I leave the earth plane through death, through medicine, through meditation. I leave the earth plane all the time because I have a very disassociative, history. And every time I fall back in love with the me that chooses to be here in the mess because, otherwise I'm just everything again, right?
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. And that's where the the receiving is so important. The spaciousness to receive the sensation of that love so that it can weave its way through just the every waking moment of the experience and not have that.
And it's also the profoundness of your construct. The construct of being a leader, being an inspiration, being a grounding element for really profound and divine essences is we're always going to have that addiction to our own perfection. In a sense, it's the fuel that is driving us forward. It's absolutely the momentum that we live within, and it's perfect in that way, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it can be confining is how I experience it. I experience it as like self-confinement, really, and just liberating myself from that and celebrating perfection, which is where it's actually really beautiful for me to witness other people so unbridled in their mess, because it serves as inspiration for my own self-acceptance, to witness beings in that space. I'm like, okay, that's what that looks like. That's a mirror for how I can accept and embrace these parts of me that are still opening into the totality of that frequential resonance of illumination carried through in all moments, and to be graceful and empathetic with my own being in the moments of contraction versus being hard on myself. And that's my own deep interweaving. I say it's subconscious, but it's actually pretty conscious because I'm aware of it. And the only addition that I had to that is the exercise that I have for myself is to just lean back into you're perfect and sacred and whole and complete exactly as you are. You are the God self, you're divine, and just continuously giving my human self those edifications and reminders as to not be so hard on myself. That's a big one. And that's really what came up in the illumination of this moon, because I'm just so aware that everything in my reality is me. And so there's the full responsibility, and there's nothing bad or even perceivably bad or negative even showing up. It's just an internal self view. And so I'm grateful that it doesn't even reflect itself. I'm deeply loved and cherished and met by my creation. There is an opportunity to receive at greater capacity. And it's just the tension within my own being that wants to resolve.
I feel like sounds like the entry point into an expansion of the vibration of compassion. In my experience, when there has been that constriction of where I felt aware of the vessel of the I am that I am was not resonating back to me, not reflecting, where I felt, I generally would then receive a huge reflection of an expansion for compassion, because compassion energy to me is the unifying energy where I can see infinite chaos and fall in love with the beauty of what that chaos is in that moment, and how it's not what I am right now. And that to me was the birth of deep compassion, was falling in love with all the things that I am no longer, when I was seeing them and feeling that difference. And then that compassionate energy was reunifying to me in those moments, reunifying of my own self and all the selves that we are. It's that compassion energy that I feel is coming in increasing immensity and beauty.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm like, fill me. See, and that's what I experience as the receiving component, because for me, it's a leaning back and an opening to allow the resonance to saturate my being somatically. So if I don't allow for that space of receivership, then the frequential resonance doesn't fully land in my being to carry through. So it always comes back to the practice of opening to receive and be penetrated by the sanctified love of the I am that I am that I am, and letting it saturate and absorb to such great depth that we can then move with it. So that's just being self-aware of what my unique system requires in order to allow that full penetration, and what the next layer and octave of depth in that is for me, because that's the, well, and for each of us, because that's always the next layer of expansion. Is it's a deep, for me, I experience it as a greater deepening and a greater opening of spaciousness. So it's like, the more I expand,
Absolutely,
less is more spaciousness, less doingness, in carrying the beingness through the doingness. It just becomes so much more vast and wide. There's the frequency of pure wonderment and awe. It's like a still majesty. And I actually connect into the frequencies of Egypt and the Syrians when our Syrian origins, when I connect to it, because it is so regal and royal and majestic. And really remembering to gulp, to gulp from that fountain and to lean back into those spaces of majesty and to be more still. And it was fascinating. I saw the other day the Bible verse, "Be still and know that I am." And the way that I experience that is just my own inner stillness and connection to that majesty. And it's the awareness that I am, not that there's an independent I am, but I am still, and I am just aware that I am that I am. And being in that observer space does create so much vastness in my being that those frequencies can anchor at a greater depth, which allows for deeper, richer presence, empathy, warmth. And what I'm always opening to the reception of is the deeper landing of the warm radiance of ambrosia that is accessible in the felt frequencies of that love, because love is a conceptualization, or any of this is not the embodiment. So it's a deepening into the embodiment layers, and just being aware of where the next edge of that is, and allowing for the deeper, like leaning in deeper than ever.
Yeah, I feel that balance exists in the Taurus energy, in the toroidal form. I think that is the infinite balance, because the giving and the receiving are mutual and in synchrony. So for me, that toroidal energy of the giving and the receiving is available at every scale, and is never still, but is still in its center. And that is true presence. To me, it's the moment of being an expression of this being and receiving the expression of all the beings. And at the center is the I am that I am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for always. Yeah. The I at the center of the infinite eternal moment. And so I'm curious,
Mm.
As the receiving and the giving become one simultaneous movement and motion, when there is an imbalance in the energetic, what do you feel creates the imbalance, and how do we return to the equilibrium? Because this is the core of it all. This is exactly the core of what everyone's desiring to land in.
If the mission of being a being in consciousness is to experience all the experiences and transmute all of the blocks and suffering, it's again the love story of being alive, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, because it does gives birth to a richer love that may be accessible if we were just occupying that space. Although my being just got really turned on, like lit up when you were saying that, because it's like, that's it. That's the point. It's being the I at the center of the I am that is the focal point of pure beingness. And then a question that I have that I feel like my I am has the answer to is, did I actually come here to transmute blocks and suffering, or did I come here to be an architect of wonderment and splendor and novelty and the greatest love story from that center point of beingness? And so then as we connect in around how to create that access point, that is my greatest desire for mastery. And that has always been my sacred, holy fire of passionate delight to tune into, is how do we, so we can say flow, we can say free energy, we can call it an access point, but as a people, as a humanity, as beings in physical bodies, that point of stabilization, what are the most palpable, potent, effective tools to support ourselves and one another with landing in that space, arriving at that space, and stabilizing that space without waver? Because that to me is the golden key. When we're there as beings, we have access to the totality of our infinite energy, infinite super consciousness, infinite power, infinite life force, infinite fuel, infinite intelligence, and self-awareness and self-gnosis, everything that we require for our architectural journey and mythological unfolding is encoded at that point, that 0 point, that bliss point. And so my intrigue has always been with one, and that's where the perfection molecule comes in with me, is I feel a responsibility to stabilize it. So when there's points of vulnerability, just like my mothering, fathering, caregiving nature feels like I'm not being responsible to my service in beingness when I experience those spaces of destabilization, because I feel like I'm not being of service. And that's where the it's not even self-criticism. It's just a tension that I feel. It's more judgment than it is criticism. Like, I don't feel like I criticize myself, but I do go into a space of discerning like what I did to get off kilter and how do I get back into that space to stabilize it so that I can be a beacon of that service. And it's not a lot, and for that I am grateful. It is very subtle, I would say, in contrast to what most beings experience, but it is augmented. The contrast is augmented in my being because I'm so aware of what it is to be at that focal point and having a real deep desire to master the stabilization so that those tools can then be provided in the most efficient, effective way for all beings. And, you know, I mean, I've created many programs and courses for the synthesis of superconscious intelligence in our embodiment. And all of that is there. And I also feel, this is my inner Einstein, that there has to be a simple, potent access point that doesn't require a depth of internal work. And it's like the desire for that synchrony in my own consciousness to occur. So that's, I'm just like recalling that.
I can feel from the bottom of my heart, the place that you are looking for is an even finer attunement into the present moment.
Yes.
This is like the spectrum of what feels like the present moment to us can be huge, massive. We can feel like we're in the present moment. And if our being is just one instant second before that, then we are losing that just divine observer. And I believe that you are trying to return to even finer tuning of that present moment. Your being is expanding so much to hold so much, and also asking all that is being held within that to have an even more precise attunement to the present moment. And when you get into that space, then there can be no thinking, and there is no fixing, and there's no analyzing, and there's nothing but being.
Yeah.
So I feel that present moment attunement is really centering even deeper than you already hold. And I feel that shift within myself every day, all day. I'll notice how big and small my present moment perception can change.
Yes. That's gorgeous. I mean, that's deeply, deeply beautiful. And as you're sharing, I'm becoming aware as I move through the day. I mean, you know, it's just pure synchronicity constantly with the time, with the alignments, with having a thought and having something occur nearly simultaneously, instantaneously, and also being aware of where I am still in my analytical mind. So I think that what I just received from receiving you is to actually access greater depths of feeling and super sensuality in the physical vessel, and more release of the mind. And that is what allows for that refinement to unfold itself. And so that's the practice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for you know.
I love that you said sensuality, because, you know, I was speaking with so much precision about time, but it really is a love affair within that too, because it is also part of the hologram, right? So when we get attuned to the present moment, the hologram kind of dissolves and we return back to our all presence. And that is the most sensual place to be, because it is just unfurling and swirling and touching itself. And, you know, it's exactly as you're saying it to be. And it has no mind to mind anything that is being or not being. And that is the ultimate freedom of all freedoms. And I mean, it doesn't take precision, but from the way that the mind understands itself, it is a precision to be in sensuality.
Yes. In a precision to be in presence too, and to be anchored in that, in the body, and to allow those currents to flow unencumbered through the totality of the physical vessel. And so it's a constant leaning in, deepening in, richening in, dropping in, feeling, sensing, like, oh, it's so good. I'm like, yes, I'm just going to make love to my soul after we complete this call tonight. I'm so excited about it.
Yes. I feel its majesty.
Yeah. That's been the invitation. I recall sitting with a beloved connecting deeply in just several weeks ago. And that was my commitment for the month of August. And here we are at August 23rd. And I have been in the whirlwind of events and gatherings and all of this. And I haven't fully devoted to that space of sensuality that because this exact conversation.
Isn't it interesting how you fully have, because you came full circle to receiving this in this moment by all the messes that were made to have the realization. So you have been making love to this sensuality devotion all month. It's just been another mirror to remind you. It's so poetic.
Thank you. And thank you for that's so true. Because even as I've moved through a lot of the mess, I have embraced the mess more deeply and been extraordinarily thankful for it, because it's shaken up so many of my deep-rooted patterns that otherwise would just be so solidly anchored in my being that wouldn't have, without the mess, without the tears, without the letting go of having to have, my life set up in this very specific way with the unfolding of my ceremonies and my practices and everything, but just being in the wilderness, literally. And it was such a gift. Like there was a whole new freedom that was birthed, and to witness other beings in that space was such a refreshment for me to feel and to move through those alchemical spaces. And then it's just remembering to remember the perfection in those moments when I'm not in those moments anymore and the recollection of them arises. To not judge it in hindsight, but to be with the richness and the savoriness and the birthing of deep, flavorful fragrance.
It's all remembering and forgetting. Yeah.
Yeah. And what it actually does bring online, that like this deep-seated potentiality.
Yes.
Yeah. That would otherwise remain dormant, and recognizing the tremendous gift and the grace in that, because that's all part of the refinement into the deeper presence that allows me to even experience a richer sense and sensation of my own being, a richer ecstasy in union with my own self and my own vessel and my own essence and song, that potentially would be dormant if all of those other instances were not precisely as they were in the moment that they arose. Yeah, thank you. It's so beautiful to have reflections.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this mirrors my emergence from this hiding in the forest. I could be in a not knowing and a no self story there, because I wasn't receiving, the mirrors of self through, other humanness. And as I've been more interacting with a world that has all of these practices, I've really kind of first emerged, and I was like, well, I need to go to the School for Humanities so I can learn about what emotions are. I need to learn about, what these systems are that people live within. And this week brought up all of these things that I hadn't felt affected by, because I was retreating from existing in the world. And when I met them, I disassociated them from being a part of me, because I wasn't feeling affected by them. And yet they showed me more of what is no longer in service, that has obsoleted itself in the codex of this whole consciousness that we live in. And it just kept having all of these additional gifts, like, oh, that is still operating here, but it's actually not doing anything anymore. We are just in a habitual dance with it because of habit, but actually it's not performing any service. It's not it was just so funny. I felt that way. There's some things about the money paradigm. There were some things about the work paradigm, like how many things are literally obsoleting themselves in the world right now, just simply from this dimensional changes that we are doing together.
Yeah. Well, so
and I think that that's part of what's occurring for you as well. There, yeah.
Totally. It's just like a total dissolution of all of these things that are non-substantial in nature to get like to just experience the raw substantiality and essence of our super nature. And to like, that is the gold. That's the sustenance. That's the gold. And from that direct felt experiential embodiment, everything else emerges. So it's an organic unfurling versus a map plan, because there's a greater destiny that can unfold itself from that space that requires presence, and the exhilaration coupled with slight terror that can unfurl itself in that space is that it does require us to let go of everything except for what is right here, right now. And that is that's the space my being is taking me to. And I'm used to operating an enterprise that requires this certain level of precision, mapping, architecture, planning, being in my masculine. But what I'm realizing is that what my being is calling me to in this next phase, to even deliver the message, because I must embody it to deliver it, is pure present moment flow, and trusting that with the lucidity of that presence in the now, each step of the architectural design will reveal and unfold itself in the moment without my mind needing to configure or architect it, but to allow my grand mind and the grand cosmic design in order to reveal it instead. So it's a whole new mode of operation that I've been aware of for a long time, but I'm actually like right in the thick of the experience, the experiential embodiment of it now, where my being will no longer allow me to operate in the other way. Things don't work in my reality if I try to conceive of the architecture versus allowing the architecture to reveal moment to moment to moment. And it requires, I mean, this is what I would consider cutting edge faith, cutting edge knowing, cutting edge being, cutting edge living in its most pristine essence. And that's
I love that you're using, oh, sorry.
No, you're great. That was
well, you keep using the word architecture, and I love the profoundness of that, because it gives reminder to the Cartesian system and its influence over all of humanity, and how big of an imprint that was on humanity's own thinking, their own occupation of their houses, our own understandings of counting, communicating. Like every single layer of consciousness had been systemized into systems that were not our divine nature. They were in systems of numbers and angles and precision that is so far from the organic chaos beauty that we are, just ever changing, ever morphing, with its own systems. Like, you know, there's perfection in numbers, there's perfection in those things, but they are not in this really precise, orthogonal way that we are interacting with them. And I think that that is another code that's really trying to rectify itself in the operating system right now. Is you are this Fibonacci curl, you are this unfurling flower, you are these interwoven blades of grass. We would like you to have this remembrance. This is you. This is the way that we have this elegant perfection, organic perfection. That is truly what's moving through you and all of us right now. We're not working the same work weeks. You know, we all used to wake up at 8 o'clock and go to boxes till 5 o'clock. And now we're all blooping all over the place. We have like no system for this work rigidity. I think that that's a huge remembering that everybody's happening. I can wake up whenever I want. I can follow the sun. I can follow these other systems. All of the codes are giving an opportunity to breathe again, to be their true nature. Yes. And I feel that you're really feeling that in reacquainting yourself within your work inside your own constructed paradigm. Oh, yes. I don't want to use the word constructed. Let's say let's pause that and say painted, danced, any of those things.
That's what I feel. I see it as the dance of
sculpted,
sacred geometrical, because it's precising in its design, but it's already inherent and encoded. It's not for us to architect, it's for us to move in coherence with. And that's the major differential here. And because that patterning with every movement shifts and reorchestrates itself. It's not fixed, which is the architectural system that we have created. That is what is creating the rigidity and the limitation for our society and our humanity versus 100%. Moving. I'm so grateful we're in the age of Aquarius. Hallelujah. Can we all feel it, please, for a moment? Shifting. We're here, baby. We are here. And it is global, enlightened, living, and swimming, and dancing. Yes. And this is the way.
Yes.
This is the way of the future now. This is what we're all opening into, and being in this gorgeous silken dance and flow with one another, and learning an entirely new way of being and creating and moving in synchrony with nature itself, which allows for the greater technological design to unfurl itself, reveal itself, unfurl itself in the moment. But it's a completely different way of being and moving through life.
I love that you said this nature, because in a way, you know, man is liking to try and wield its like power over nature in its physical form, but she is also us. And so if you dig into her and make boxes on top of her and you mine her and you cut her down, she will just move further and more of her into our own selves so she can exist to her fullness and just blast herself back into perfection by just being so deeply within us in her absolute majesty that we're going to laugh at our own systems. I love this.
Right. Yes, that's so true. I still even, I mean, well, you know, and it's also a lot of being way, way, way ahead of our time, so to speak, but just being at that edge of awareness that, like, when I fly in airplanes over cities, I recognize the beauty, and I'm also so deeply attuned to the inefficiencies in the elementary construction of all of it. And my questioning has been, how will our consciousness remold this in a way that is coherent and honoring of what is currently existing? How will we transition this into the most elegant, efficient societal structure?
The irony is, I believe the internet is going to help us do that, because we're going to see something so profoundly, like, beautifully done, efficient, simple, like we're just going to see somebody else's majesty and laugh at our own ridiculousness. I really feel that social awareness, global awareness will do that. I think that if you think about, third world countries and how they weren't doing things different from the natural, and then they were able to see, America and its bad habits, and then they fell in love with that, and then they recognized its own darkness and retreated back into their own systems in some ways. I think it's the same thing. It's like, that's part of the global transmutation. They receive a sickness from seeing and being infected with the sickness of another society. They move through that sickness, and then they have made themselves immune to that forgetting by recognizing, okay, just because I was infected by this addiction that this other society had, doesn't mean that I forgot that we actually were doing it pretty great for a long time.
Yes.
I think we're going to fall back in love with our old system.
Yes. And merging them with the sophistication of the technology that we are and that we have access to now.
Exactly.
So there's this whole evolutionary, it's just so majestic and rich with wonderment. The fusion of nature and science and technology into these hyper organic, elegant, efficient creations and architectures that allow us all to thrive in coherency with all that is, with the totality of the self. And it's like, I'm here in my being. And I think that can be also an interesting focal point of being in awareness while being immersed in the currents of what is current. Just being here, being so aware of breatharianism, of thriving on life force and light energy, becoming astral travelers in our light bodies, and seeing the potentiality for us to live hundreds and hundreds of years in this lifetime in the physical vessels that we're currently in. And I've been speaking into this for years because I've gone through such a depth of purification in my own vessel just to even allow for that level of consciousness to birth. I'm like, we're here and we're in it and it's happening. And I'm just in that space in my own being. And so it's fascinating to have that existing simultaneously with the current constructs of humanity. And also being delighted for the unfurling of all of this right now, right here in this precising moment in time, being present for the transitional dance.
And I also feel that there is going to be a moment where enough of us have fully surrendered to the I am that I am, and that we will spontaneously all wake up.
Yes.
So
I was just also that too. I'm like, actually, the more of us that hold this frequency, this isn't something that I haven't shared about this, but I actually just had I've shared this with like a beloved. I had a quantum subspace field reading done on my physical embodiment, my energetics, to measure my nutrient levels and all of that, to do a full analysis of my physical system to see what I could do to optimize my own health, wellness, operating system, frequency, all of that. And the average human resonance is 1,000 hertz in the physical body. When my reading came back, my hertz per second, cycles per second, were 12,500 hertz per second of resonance in the physical body. And after moving through the protocol to go to the next depth of clarity in my own being, it raised by 1,000 hertz to be at 13,500 hertz per second. And so that's simply a measurement of light information in the physical body. And so the more of us who hold this frequential resonance, exactly as you're saying, the more we elevate the collective body of consciousness, which allows for that instantaneous phase shift of actual physicality, which allows us to snap into these entirely new worlds, realms. And I see it all the time, right? I'm still like, we've got New Earth Nation, we've got all these new architectures all over. Some people aren't even aware of them at all. And I'm like, we've got a whole new world.
Oh my gosh. I'm surprised that, I'm surprised that there isn't, I don't know. I see it every day. There's just more and more reminders in the frequency. And I'm surprised that there's still people in the spiritual communities that are having any urgency about anything, because from where I'm looking, everything's could be any second now. It's so
I love you so much. I feel like for me, so if I ever have a sense of urgency, I don't feel it on a global scale because I just trust that. It's more in my own personal experience when it comes to my own way of being. And again, the stabilization of that diamond crystalline core, because there's such a deep-seated sense of mothership, fathership, responsibility to that space. And so if I'm not in absolute equilibrium, I feel a sense of urgency in my being. That's kind of like, and this is my own self-created paradigm of like, red alert, get back into center, but there's nothing.
Wow. Beautiful.
Nothing ever out manifests from those micro moments of being in time, ultimately. However, there is still a visceral layer of destabilization that arises for me somatically that's still ironing itself out. So it's not
I love that you bring this up, because this is the mirror to this existential complacency that I hold sometimes, because like I said, I leave and come back so many times. And when I leave, I see when we have fully reunited into our divine nature and all is healed and all is returned. And every time I go on that journey and see the perfection, I fall in love again with the process that we are in right now. And then I choose to come back. And then I'll be really just exultant in that choice to be here for a certain period. And then after another certain period, I'll go back to remembering like, oh, well, even if I don't do anything, we're still going to end up back in perfection and reunited. So I don't have to show up. And then I'll go on another journey and I'll leave the earth plane to get the reminder. No, you really want to be here. Every time you forget that you want to be here, you leave and come back and remember that you do want to be here.
Yeah.
So this is like this divine complacency that I have. It's like, oh, everything's perfect. No matter what, we're all going to come back together. So, I can be there or not be there. But then I love falling in love with the me that wants to play in this time and to play in this humanness and to play in the discovery and to play in the potentiality. And only recently have I entered into a field where it's like, absolute new creation, that there's a part of divinity that's recognizing it will exceed its own self-understanding and be born again in its own kind of way. And that is the thing that really excites me now is, okay, I've left and come back so many times that actually now I'm entering into another field where divinity is recognizing its own potentiality and saying like, yes, we're all going to come back together and we are going to be united and divine again. And all the discoveries, all the transmutation, all of the everything that is occurring in this process is its own expansion of the divine. And that is really what excites me to go beyond that which I could ever conceive from one moment to the next.
It's
Yeah.
Thank you. Like, just, I'm feeling the root of ambrosial enthrallment with the felt experience of the self. And actually, that, not that we're going to return to that space, but that we are that space, be that space, inhabit that space here in the dance, which is what allows for the novel creation of self to unfold in that space. Glory, like that just sparks my entire, because that for me is freedom. That's real freedom, being in that space of unfurling new geometry from pure potentiality at the edge in divine unified perfection in the body, in the humanness, in connection to the glory of the human experience. For me truly is beauty and sensuality and the felt ecstasy of love in the here and now. And that's the simplicity of it, for where I experience my greatest self fulfillment in connection to whatever it is that I happen to be experiencing in that moment. And so the constant deepening and richening into those bits, just like an ooey gooey delicious raw cacao, decadent divine cookie, like in my soul, that I feel like if my soul was a dessert, it would be cacao. It's just that deep, rich, majestic.
I love that you're using all these flavor words, because this is something that I learned sometimes when I journey really far, is the divine has no senses, right? So this deliciousness that we experience here in eating is actually one of the most ecstatic things to the divine, because it's in all, you can't taste anything. I've noticed this theme in all of these different media pieces, where it's always about the human delight in eating.
It's in the senses.
So you're using all the delicious like taste words, because that's one of the most real things.
The taste and the smell and the super sensory. And just so you're aware, my battery notification just came up, so my computer is going to go in any moment.
Okay.
But this is, I feel like
that's
this is
beautiful.
A beautiful space to like even just braid, like to weave it all together, is like the return to super sensuality and what it actually is to be what we like adept consciousness connoisseurs, or the illuminated beings that we all inherently are, or psychic, or any of that. It's just a refined capacity of the senses and the sensory, somatic, visceral experience, and our capacity to interpret and receive and to feel and to sense data through all of our senses, our extrasensory awareness, but also just simply taste and touch and smell, and constantly moving more deeply and richly into those faculties that allows for a fullness of animation and experience. It's like creation awake, the vibrancy of the Kundalini embodied, and that happens through our senses.
Oh yes.
In which we wouldn't be.
I love that you're bringing up senses, taking us back to the sensual nature, the sensual being, the sensual living, and the sensory living, I think is a great kind of guide to our day to day. Like, hey, am I being in this experience with my senses right now? And most of the time we're not. We're being in our mind with the experiences. So I think that you uncovered a really beautiful key to the sensual being experience, is being a being in senses and in sensory meeting of the consciousness, the conscious experience. I think you just nailed it there. That was really beautiful.
And like the merging and the making love. And I think this is also the answer to the original question of what is the primary access point. Yep. That is
yes,
sensuality, feeling,
yes,
is the primary. So glorious, delicious, because in the field we're just the experience of vibration.
Yes, beautiful
resonance. Here we get to like feel it all and taste it all and merge with it all. Like it's just, it's this very potent love making. I'm so enthralled right now. Like literally, I know exactly what I'm going to do after this call. And I'm so excited. And it's, well, you
fully experience it all. Yes.
Yeah.
I love how this all came together.
Yeah. Like I'm going to make some delicious cacao and I'm going to throw in some epic music and I'm just going to like feel myself. Like that feels like the most satiating gift that I could even begin to give myself in this moment. And I hope that any and everyone attuning with us will allow themselves to enter into these deeper spaces and that we do this together. Like we just enter into these more rich sensory feeling spaces as a consciousness.
Yes. And having it be the way that we navigate our day. How can I navigate my day in the sensuality of the experience? Yeah.
To feel our way forward instead of thinking our way forward. Yes.
Oh, I love that so much.
Ah, glory. Beautiful. I'm so grateful for you. Like you are such a pure holy, sacred, divine reflector and reminder of, you are the personification of my super consciousness. I feel like that is how you show up.
As are you. Yeah.
I mean, just
I feel like
all the way across the board and every moment, like you just show up as the most pure reflection of super consciousness, and it's glorious to behold. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for helping me come and be in the world. I think that is going to be my greatest work, is to be a being in the world. And I really feel that this emergence through falling in love with and being sensual beings in the world is so profound, because just to know that is what we're heralding forward and inspiring and coaxing out of beings in the ways that we both do it so elegantly every day, we will be in the greatest love story that's ever written.
Yes. We're in it now, baby.
We're in it and ever will be. Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the sacred portal, this mystical, divine, sacred quantum portal with me and with all of us. And I'm so excited for more, beloveds. We have so many more of these coming, and weekly transmissions, and potentially more contingent upon what our beings guide us into. And I'm thrilled. I'm so I'm truly actually enamored by our alignment, and so just deeply inspired by our weave in a way that I experience nowhere else. And I'm just in such deep reverence and gratitude to your being for this dance that we share, for this play that we weave, for this resonance that we recognize and reflect to one another. It's just, it lights up my child heart. Like my unicorn rainbow sprinkle Care Bear heart is just so like, that's the part of me that it's like the purest part of my essence. And I'm just I'm just ever grateful for you. I'm like, thank you for existing. Thank you for being, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, for choosing to be here.